Hi, it's Sue Greenwald here with Awakened Stories. I'm here today with Deanna Carr from the Mystical Moonlight. Hey, Deanna, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. So we're doing a Q&A, like a follow-up video. When I'm doing these recordings, a lot of times I don't prepare or I get all excited or distracted and I forget to ask a question. So I had a few good questions, and then some of our viewers also sent me questions. So I wanted to ask a few more. So the
Okay.
first topic is vampires again. All right. So for anyone that hasn't watched our previous video, please do so because that'll help save some time and confusion. But what were the vampires coming from the other planets fleeing from? You said they came to Earth seeking refuge. So what caused them to leave their planets?
Okay, so each one had a different reason. One I see they had a food shortage. Oh my gosh, I can't talk. A food shortage. They were unable to produce food, and their planet was pretty much dying, so that's why they weren't able to produce. So they did have to leave. You remember, we they weren't always vampires beforehand. Okay,
Right,
so we talked
right,
about some of them being genetically modified. Um, so some of them did come from that planet where they were on a food shortage. They did have technology, but the thing about technology is it doesn't always produce things that we can eat, right? Um, so they were able to get on, their ships, whatever they were using, and get away.
right.
Um, Most of the ships did not make it through. It looks like there were issues on the way here. Some of them did get off course and went on to different planets. So that's some of those planets. That's why they left. One of them was from the World Eater. Um, and when I say the World Eater, I pretty much kind of think of like technology advanced,
Right,
just consuming.
right.
Um, so not too many made it from there. So each world had pretty much a different purpose, but the worlds themselves were being destroyed. So it wasn't like, okay, this little bit of land is, unable to suffice us. Let's just move over here. No, it was like a whole planet was starting to become crumpled up and
Okay,
destroyed. So they had to leave the planet elsewhere.
okay,
Okay. It's kind of like what they're trying to do now with Earth. They're looking at different planets for us to go habitats and change our planet because we can't suffice here anymore because we're killing it. So instead of, trying to save it, we're just going to leave it. Um, Kind of the same thing.
okay,
Um, so that's pretty much what happened with most of those. Yeah.
okay. So when I talked to King Smarty about the world eater, he said it was dark AI. And
Mhm.
I've seen that in some of the movies. Like I just watched this movie a while ago called Moonfall, and the dark AI consciously tracks down, and in this example, the humans to try to exterminate them. So,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So these that came from the planet that didn't have food, they ate like we'll call it regular food at that point.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And then they came here. Now, who genetically modified them? And is that why? So that they could eat different kinds of food?
Well, no, not necessarily for different types of food. They wanted testers to see if these um, tests and genetic modifications would take effect and how they would take effect.
Oh,
And easy to do it. They're not every species is, completely different than us. So they were pretty close. So they were using genetic modification on them to see the repercussions, see what would happen, and also to see, you know, how the body is going to transform itself. So there were some repercussions to their testing. They didn't realize that they were going to get, these abilities also. They thought it was going to help with the food issue. If they have to limit it, if they have to limit their food intake, which they can, but the problem is now they have a different food source. And then, so there is all this testing that was happening on them. But yeah, there was some things coming out of that that they were not expecting.
okay. All right. So they modified them and now we'll call them, they partake in blood so that
Mhm.
they have all these abilities and of course that they continue to live.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and they can live for a while. So, like I said, there were parts of it they weren't expecting. They were expecting, the life expectancy to advance maybe by 100 years or so. Now it's up by thousands.
Wow. Okay.
And then the regeneration of body parts, and it's not easy to kill them. So there are things we see in the movies that are pretty accurate. Now it's not going to stake to a heart, but there are things that can kill them. But for the most part, they can regenerate.
Okay. Good way to say it. Okay. Do they create their own children or offspring? I don't know the word for that. Like,
I'm seeing there's a few that can, reproduce. It's very few because the genetic modification has altered the body on a really molecular level. So it's harder for reproduction to happen, but there are a few that have been able to.
okay. So to grow their race, would they then convert the humans over?
Yes.
And what's the process for that? Like, how long does it take? And like, does it, I would assume it would affect DNA or cell growth.
Yeah, the DNA would be affected, but it would be faster.
Okay.
Instead of 9 months, it could happen in like 4 months.
Okay.
So it does happen faster, but it, like I said, it's still rare, but they tend to come out a little bit faster.
Okay, cool. So when a vampire decides to convert a human to, their species, we'll call it that way, do they hypnotize them? Do they coerce them? Do they like how does that, is it violent like we see in the movies or
No, I mean, it depends on who's doing it.
yeah.
Like,
And
for the
yeah,
most part, it shouldn't be violence. It's going
okay.
to be easy. It's, really just injection.
Yeah.
Um, but there are ones that are more on the violent side. Like we talked about, it
Yeah.
brought up more negative sides to them. So um, most of the ones that are violent don't tend to make it.
Okay. Okay. What does that mean? They're killed?
They're killed throughout the process.
Oh, okay.
So um, they still have to, inject the venom into the person. Um, but ones that are out of control tend to take it too far, and they don't make it beforehand, before the venom can even take effect.
Okay. So they have to be careful.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would assume that their goal is really to blend in at this point, blend in, live their lives, do their thing, but not be singled out.
Yeah, they want to live a normal life. It's harder when you're abnormal. So they do try to blend in as much as they can. That's also why we have more of a nightlife in certain spaces. So it's become more common. Plus, it's easier for them to blend in. They do choose night over day. I think we kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
Um, they're easily, they can go throughout the day, but they do tend to like the nightlife more.
Okay. How will life be for them in the future, like once they're exposed or if they're exposed?
I think it's like everything. Some people don't like it.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's kind of like, it's a change. It's something that people think is a fantasy
Right.
and fairy tale. So
Right.
how is it real life? So I think that's the hard part for people.
Right. Well, there's a lot of fear and, of course, prejudice and then misconception. Just
Yeah.
like pretty much everything, the new idea takes a while to catch on and the truth to come
Mhm.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So if a vampire wanted to convert a human over, the human could decide to agree with it, and it could be an easier process.
Yep.
And, okay. And they're not hypnotized. I mean, they could be.
It's a choice. I
Yeah.
think I read some of the comments that said like, oh, I think like when I was younger, I thought it'd be cool.
Yeah.
Most people do because they have these, ideals of how vampires live.
Yeah.
Plus, living forever would be really cool versus, 100 years.
Yeah.
So there's things that they bring out in people that they want to do this.
Yeah.
They want to be part of that.
Okay. Okay. We had a couple questions about who was Dracula. So was Dracula a real person or being?
He was a real person, and there's mixed feelings about that. He wasn't mean, he was trying to save his people, and they just didn't like how he did it.
Okay. So they probably revolted, is my guess.
Yeah, they did revolt, but at the end of the day, he tried to do the best he could,
Okay.
and he became a vampire to save them.
Okay. All right. Anything else we should know with that story?
I don't know. If you
Okay.
guys have questions, let me know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, everyone was asking who he was. I got a whole bunch of questions about that. So,
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, he did it to save his people. Like there was war coming. And what better way to fight a war when you're indestructible?
okay, of
How else can you save it? Like, so there are leaders that do care about their people.
course.
There are leaders that will put themselves before others, or, put their body. Like, how do you say that?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
It's hard to say because our people don't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
But they would sacrifice themselves before they'd sacrifice their people. And
Right.
that's what he did. They didn't like it because it was this unknown being trying to protect them. And I mean, a vampire, it did suck blood.
Yeah.
So it was scary, right? I mean, not used to it, right?
Right.
So it was a scary ideal for them. Like I said, it was a real person. There were real people in part of that, and most of the history had depicted it correctly. Um, there was just making him seem like it was just because he was a vampire versus he was trying to save his people from ending up in a bad situation.
Okay. So did he live through that process?
He did. Yeah.
Okay. And what happened to the people? Did they die?
No, the people on his side, most of them survived.
Oh, good.
I mean, there was still some loss, but it wasn't as much.
All right. All right. All right. And what about now when I've I'm not researching this or anything, but um when you would research Dracula or the history or origins of that, you would normally get a hit on Vlad the Impaler.
Mhm.
And so was he a different being than Dracula?
No, he was the next.
He was the next one,
Yeah.
but he was
So
more cruel. Or was that just a war situation?
it was a war situation. I
Um,
mean, do we all know what happens on the battlefield unless we're there?
no,
No.
no.
We just know about it because it was so intense, right?
Yeah.
Um, they he did this to put up warning signs. Same thing. They're trying to save their people. What
Um,
other better way than saying, get away?
yeah.
I mean, it happens throughout history in different situations, but that was basically get back, stay away, leave us be.
Okay. Good answer. All right. So it was there a concentration of vampires in what's now Romania? Because we hear like they've buried certain people with these sharp blades across their throat. So if they sit up after they're buried, they'll chop their heads off. Is there more of a concentration there?
Yeah, that's kind of like or where they originated, I guess, like
Yeah.
where they chose to kind of stay. They're everywhere though.
Yeah, I get it.
It's not just there, but that's where they kind of like felt they could fit in the best. It's easier to disguise themselves there. It's easier to find places to kind of hide out and to fit in
Okay.
versus, elsewhere. But like I
Okay.
said, now it's easier for people, so it's easier for them to go around and travel.
Cool. Okay. Since we did the first video, I literally got two calls with people telling me their personal stories, and it's
Yeah.
been fascinating. So we'll be bringing those stories out when the time is right. Okay.
Awesome.
Yay. All right. I'm going to switch topics now. The next topic is the moon. Like we did that video, let's say 3 weeks ago or so, and there were some concerns there. So we basically said that we have been up on the moon, but it's not the traditional rocket ship method. Mostly the dome covers our section of Earth, and we can't shoot a rocket ship through the dome. But we are able to get to the moon and other planetary bodies through other technologies. And we've been out there for a long time. And again,
Yeah.
the general population doesn't know that or understand it. But what we had talked about with the Alcatraz story was those three guys that escaped went up and they were like advisors as to how to create a like a concentration camp, living quarter, prison system up there on the moon that you
Yeah.
could spread across a lot of the quadrants or districts on the moon, right? And that has been replicated on the other planets as well, that
Yeah.
kind of situation. Okay. So there was concern about, basically the slaves on the moon or other places. So those slaves are mostly the miners and or scientists. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And they're on the moon. Like once they're there, they're, never getting
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they have their families there and they are there for multiple generations.
Yes.
And so those other generations, they don't even know that, let's say, that we exist.
Nope. They're used to what they're doing. They're not really taught. They're there for specific reasons.
Yeah. So just like we don't know that they exist, they don't know
Mhm.
that we exist. Now, we're lucky enough to be what I call free range at this point, but they don't have the luxury of like the stuff that we have, right?
Yeah.
They've
They
got
don't
a
have that.
much harder life in those prisons and concentration camps. So isn't that horrible? Like,
Mhm.
and so do they encourage families to have lots of kids on the moon in these camps?
A few, not a lot.
Okay, they don't want a lot of kids, mostly because somebody has to watch them.
Yeah.
Okay,
And they can't start doing stuff until a certain point in time.
how do they get more minors?
Well, they use them. They don't want huge families. They do
Yeah.
want kids though, but
Okay.
they have a certain range they can start doing stuff.
Okay.
So if you have, kid after kid, one, they lose the person that's popping out the kids, and then two, they have to wait however many years. So
Right.
they do use the kids.
Yeah.
It's just they don't want super large families.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would expect they would want like limited kids because that just, you've got to watch them, you've got to teach them and
Yeah,
for an appropriate number of years until they're ready to work. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, just a horrible situation. Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you see those, the miners on the moon, all of them being freed? I might have already asked that before.
I do. It's gonna take a little bit though. It's not gonna be easy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot of complexity, I would think. You said there were 57 different races on the moon, or
Yeah,
at least. So there's going to be a lot of complexity and a lot of
yeah.
trouble.
It's
Okay.
gonna take a while, and then plus it's a certain territory. So then there's just it's complex.
Okay, cool. All right. Then a generic question. People used to harvest herbs and plant their plants in by the moonlight. And is there any benefit to that theory or concept of doing that?
There is still some benefits to moonlight. Um, Now the issue is the moon that we're seeing is not the right moon. But once in a while we do have the glow from the real moon come through. So yes, there are still some benefits.
Okay. So basically, Smarty has told us that the moon, basically the only benefit of the moon that we see is the light that we receive from it. It does not affect the tides. It does not affect this or that, like we've been told. All right. And we're,
Depends on which moon you're talking about.
yeah. Well, that was leading to my next question. So we've got this what would you call it? Man-made moon. It's really what you an ark or a ship up there. And then
Yeah.
we have a real moon. Where is that real moon?
It's still out there. We just don't see it all the time. So
Okay.
a way to think about it is, have you ever noticed how once in a while the moon seems really close for no reason?
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden it's super large, where the other day it was really small.
Yeah, I have.
So which moon are we looking at?
Yeah. We're seeing video evidence of second moons appearing, and of course, second and even third suns appearing, you know.
Yeah.
So we've got that out there, and we're seeing more and
Mhm.
more evidence of that. And I think that we're going to see more and more planetary bodies, or I don't know what you want to call them,
Mhm.
planets, moons,
Yeah.
whatever, in our atmosphere than we did before.
Yeah.
So it's going to be different than what we're used
It's
to
gonna
now.
be different than what we're used to, and there are glitches happening. So like I said, you can see
Yeah.
it once in a while. The moon
Yeah.
all of a sudden seems super large.
Yeah,
The day before it was super small. How did
yeah,
that change? It didn't, come closer overnight,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And or it'll like let's say it's on the left on a Tuesday, it could be radically over on the right on a Wednesday. And I'm like, whoa, that's not what we've been taught how it works.
Yeah.
It's there's a progression. So it's very interesting how we're seeing it so amplified at this point in time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they say that we're going to see that second moon this month officially. And
Okay.
my guess is that as time goes on, we're going to see more and more of these planetary bodies, in our face. Like right
Yeah.
here, we go out and there they are.
Mhm. Yeah, it's going to progress.
Yeah. So is there any other question I should ask about the moon, the civilization up there, what's going to happen, how it's going to happen that I haven't asked?
I feel like we've covered most of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I know I saw some questions about it, but I think we've covered most of it.
Okay.
So if
Good.
there's something I've missed, obviously put comments in below, but I think we've covered
All right.
it
All
all.
right. And what about vampires? I didn't ask that question. Any other things we need to know that I haven't asked?
No,
Yeah.
going off some of the comments, it's okay if you wanted to be a vampire at one point in your life. Okay, I wanted it too. Sometimes I think it'd still be pretty cool. Obviously, a good vampire. So don't think that you're bad for wanting that. There are pros and cons to being a vampire. Um, so like I said, it's all about that empathy that's left over.
Right.
So not all of them are bad. So you wanting to be a vampire at one point in time does not mean that you're a bad person.
Yeah. Oh, here's a question about vampires. Do they eat regular food as well as blood? Like, say, a sandwich or whatever?
Some of them can.
Okay.
So it depends on, like I said, some of it they've changed and they don't find normal food as appealing. So
Okay.
they don't eat it. It all depends on the person and what has changed about them.
Okay. Do they know their history of their planets and all of that?
No.
So they don't know that they don't
It's
uh,
yeah, most of them have lost that. Some of them still know, but for most part, most of them lost it.
okay, interesting. Okay. Well, I thank you again for your time. I have lots more questions, but I feel like we should wrap it up here and we'll do another Q&A another time. Thank
Sounds
you so
good.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye.